Hello, my friend. Today I will tell you another long-forgotten legend. Close your eyes and let the magic transport you to Middle-earth. Our journey begins.
The morning light fell gently upon the hidden valley of Imladris, and the rivers sang softly beneath the bridges of stone. Spring had returned to Middle-earth, and peace, long unimagined, now dwelt in many lands. Yet not all songs spoke of joy. In the libraries of Elrond, where the dust of ages gathered upon scroll and tome, whispers of unrest had begun to stir once more. Gandalf the White stood upon a high balcony, his staff leaning against the carved rail. His gray eyes, calm yet far-seeing, looked westward beyond the mountains. Though Sauron was gone and his power broken, Gandalf's heart was not wholly at rest, for he knew well that evil, once sown in the world, does not easily wither. Some seeds lie hidden long beneath the earth, waiting for shadow and silence to call them forth again. A soft step sounded behind him. It was Elrond, ageless and grave. "You are uneasy, my friend," said the Lord of Rivendell. Gandalf smiled faintly. "A wizard seldom finds ease, even in days of peace," he replied. "But there are tales from the west that trouble me. Wanderers from Holland speak of lights moving through the ruins at night, and of a sound beneath the earth, a hammer's echo faint and deep." Elrond's gaze darkened. "Eregion," he murmured, "the land of the Gwathi Myrdain, where once Celebrimbor forged the rings of power. That place was broken and burned long ago. What stir there now cannot be of the living." "Perhaps not," said Gandalf quietly. "Yet sometimes the dead leave things unfinished." There was a long silence between them, broken only by the murmur of the waterfalls below. Then Elrond said, "Will you go there?" "I must," Gandalf answered, "for if any shadow lingers among those stones, it is a remnant of an ancient evil, one that must be set to rest before I take ship to the west." Elrond placed his hand upon Gandalf's arm. "Few could walk those lands unharmed, yet if you go, I shall send word to Lindon. There are still elves who remember the forges of Eregion and the secrets buried there." "Good," said Gandalf, and his eyes shone briefly like stars. "Then it is settled." That very evening, as twilight deepened and the valley glowed with silver light, Gandalf made his preparations. He took with him Shadowfax, swiftest of horses, and little else save his staff, his sword Glamdring, and a pouch of lembas bread gifted by the elves. As he departed, many stood upon the terraces to see him go, their hearts heavy, though they knew not why. For even among the wise it was felt that this journey would be Gandalf's last upon the soil of Middle-earth. He rode westward beneath the rising moon, the wind in his hair, and the faint scent of spring, blossoms on the air. By the second day he had crossed the Horwell and come to the wild country beyond, where grasslands gave way to stony hills. The path grew quiet and desolate, and the trees, few and withered, whispered of old sorrows. Toward evening, Gandalf came upon 3 riders encamped near a ruined watchtower. They rose swiftly at his approach, cloaks gray as the dusk. "Hail, friends," said Gandalf, reining in his horse. "You are far from the northern roads. What brings the Dunedain to these forsaken lands?" The leader, a tall man with keen eyes and a cloak fastened by a silver star, bowed his head. "We serve the chieftain of the north, my lord," he said. "Rumor speaks of strange movements in the ruins of Eregion, lights, fires beneath the ground, and a trembling of the hills at night. We were sent to learn the truth, but we have found little save unease." Gandalf nodded. "Then our purposes are joined. I ride there as well. If you will, we may travel together." So it was that Gandalf gained companions for his road, men of the north, silent and steadfast, who still kept watch over the forgotten borders. That night they shared their fire with him beneath the stars, speaking little, for the wind carried strange sounds through the hills. On the third morning, they reached the edge of the Holland Plain. Before them stretched a wide land of heather and broken stone. Far off, the mountains of Moria stood dark against the sky, and between them and the travelers lay the desolate ruins of Eregion. Once it had been fair, filled with the music of hammer and anvil, the glow of forge light, and the laughter of the elven smiths. Now the plain was silent. Only the wind moved among the toppled pillars and the shattered walls. Half sunk in earth, the company dismounted and led their horses on foot, for no beast willingly entered that place. As the sun set behind the misty mountains, Gandalf halted upon a rise. "There," he said, pointing toward a dark mass of stone ahead. "The remnants of Austin Edhiel, the heart of Eregion. We make our camp yonder, but take care, my friends. The air is thick with memory, and not all memories sleep." When the night deepened, Gandalf sat alone by the fading fire, his eyes fixed upon the shadowed ruins. Once or twice he thought he saw a glimmer, faint and cold, far off among the broken halls, as if something below had stirred. Then from the depths of the ruins there came a sound, slow, deliberate, and deep. The ring of metal striking metal, once, twice, and then silence. Gandalf rose, his staff blazing faintly in the dark. The Dunedain drew their blades. "The hammer of the forges," whispered one of them. "By the stars, it is true." Gandalf's gaze did not waver. "Aye," he said softly, "something works below. Something that remembers the fire of old." The night wind passed through the hollow stones, carrying with it a whisper that none could quite understand, yet all felt its chill. And so began the journey into the ruins of the ancient lands. Morning rose, cold and pale, over the plain of Holland. The mist clung to the stones like ghosts, reluctant to fade, and the air carried the scent of earth long undisturbed. Gandalf stood before the blackened archway of Ost in Edhiel, his white cloak bright against the ruin, and Shadowfax stamped uneasily at his side. The three Dunedain waited behind him, grim and silent, their hands upon their sword hilts. Here the elven smiths labored, Gandalf said at last, his voice low, and here Sauron came to them in fair disguise. The memory of that deceit lingers still. He stepped forward, his staff gleaming faintly as if seeking out the path ahead. "Stay close and speak little. Let not your minds wander, for in places such as these, even thought can awaken that which should sleep." They passed beneath the archway and into the ruins. The light dimmed as though some unseen hand had veiled the sun. All around were tumbled halls and scorched columns, carved with half-faded runes of the Gwaith Imirdain. The stones bore the marks of flame and violence, remnants of that day when Sauron's host swept through Eregion and left it desolate. Gandalf moved with slow purpose, his eyes searching every shadow. "This city was not wholly destroyed," he murmured. "Some of its secrets were buried deep, sealed away when Celebrimbor fell." They came to a great courtyard, overgrown with black thorns. At its center stood the shattered remains of a fountain, dry and broken, yet its basin glimmered faintly with a light that was not of the sun. Gandalf knelt beside it, tracing a finger along its rim. The stone was warm to the touch. "Fire below," he said softly. "There are forges still burning in the deeps." One of the Dunedain, a younger man called Arvain, glanced uneasily toward the dark stairway that led downward. "Could it be that some of Sauron's creatures yet live here?" he asked. "No creature of flesh," Gandalf replied, "but power remains. The work of the Mirrodin was mighty, and the craft of Sauron mingled with it. The very earth was scorched by their making. What lies beneath is more perilous than beasts." As they descended the stone stair, the air grew heavy with the scent of metal and ash. The walls were carved with sigils that pulsed faintly in the staff's light, glowing and fading like embers in a dying forge. Far below they heard again that sound, a hammer striking metal, slow and steady. The passage opened into a vast chamber. Its roof was lost in darkness, but a red glow flickered deep within, reflecting upon pillars of iron and the remains of shattered anvils. Pools of molten light shimmered upon the ground, though no living fire fed them. Gandalf's eyes narrowed. "This was the heart of the forges," he said, "the place where the rings of power were born." He stepped forward, his staff raised high. Then suddenly the hammering ceased. A silence followed, thick and suffocating. From the shadows beyond the forge pit came a voice, soft and echoing, like iron scraping upon stone. "So, the servant of the secret fire returns to walk among ashes." The Dunedain stiffened, blades flashing in the red light. Gandalf's staff flared white. "Who speaks?" he demanded. "Show yourself." Something stirred in the darkness. A figure emerged, tall and cloaked in flame-like shadow. Its form wavered, half seen, as though it were not wholly bound to the world of flesh. In its hand it held a hammer, black as obsidian, its head still glowing from unseen heat. "I am Thamior," it said, its voice rising like a hiss of steam. "Once of Owl's host, long ago, betrayed, forgotten, cast into the dark. Yet I remember the song of the forges and the fire that gave shape to all things." Gandalf's heart stirred with grim recognition. "A servant of the ancient craft," he said. "You were lost in the wars of old, before even the first age ended." Thamior's shadow deepened, its eyes burning with cold fire. "Not lost," it said, "bound. When Sauron took the guise of Anatar, he came to Eregion and awoke me from long sleep. Together we made wonders, but he was faithless and left me here to burn when the city fell. I have waited through silence and ruin, and now the world grows careless once more. I shall forge anew the power that was stolen from me." "You shall forge nothing," said Gandalf sternly. "The time of such making is ended. The fires of domination are quenched." Thamior laughed, a sound that echoed through the chamber like the fall of hammers. "You speak as though victory were eternal, Grey Pilgrim. But you know better. You have seen the wheel of ages turn. Light rises and falls as shadow ever does. I am no servant of Sauron now. I am the Flame Reborn, the Maker Unchained." With that, the shadow raised its hammer high. Sparks burst from the ground, and the air trembled. The Dunedain fell back, shielding their faces from the glare. Gandalf stood firm, his staff blazing like a pillar of white fire. "By the flame imperishable," he cried, "you shall not rise again in Middle-earth." The chamber roared with sound as light and darkness clashed. The floor cracked beneath them, and molten fire spilled from the fissures. Thamior struck with his hammer, and Gandalf met it with the staff. the impact ringing like thunder. For long moments they struggled, light against shadow, memory against ruin. The Dunedain watched, unable to approach. Then at last Thamior reeled back, his form flickering. "This world forgets its makers," he hissed, "but I will endure. The fire remembers." The shadow collapsed into a cloud of smoke and sparks that sank into the floor, vanishing into the deep. The forge pit fell silent once more. Gandalf lowered his staff, weary but unshaken. "He is not destroyed," he said, "only driven back. His power clings to the stones, feeding on what remains of the old works. We must find the root and end it." Arvain approached, his face pale. "Can such a being truly be slain?" "Not slain," Gandalf answered, "but unmade. If the forges are broken, his fire will fade. Yet that task may demand more than strength. It may demand sacrifice." He turned his gaze upward to the high vaults, where the faint hum of unseen power still pulsed. "The heart of Eregion still beats," he murmured, "and I must still the last breath of its fire." The company stood silent amid the ruin, the glow of the dying embers flickering over their faces. Outside the world was quiet, but beneath their feet, something vast and ancient stirred. Thus began their descent into the deeps of the forges, where the last shadow of Sauron's craft yet clung to life. The hammering was silenced for now, but in the dark beyond hearing, it seemed that another pulse echoed, slow, steady, and waiting, and Gandalf knew that the true battle had not yet begun. The company descended deeper into the earth, leaving behind the chamber where the first clash had been fought. The stair wound downward through stone that gleamed faintly red, as though lit from within by a dying fire. The air was close and heavy, thick with the scent of soot and molten metal. Every sound, the scrape of boots, the faint tap of Gandalf's staff, echoed for a long time before fading into the dark. They went in silence, for no one among them wished to speak. Gandalf walked at their head, his white cloak dimmed by the shadows. His face was grave, though his eyes burned with a quiet light. From time to time he raised his staff, casting a pale glow ahead to reveal the carvings that lined the tunnel walls. Ancient runes, blackened and cracked, marks of the smiths who had labored there when Eregion was young and proud. At last they came to a wide passage, and there the floor split in two directions. One path sloped gently downward toward the red gleam of molten light. The other rose toward a wind that whispered faintly of the surface world. "Which way now, my lord?" asked Arvain, his voice hushed. Gandalf studied the runes etched upon the wall. "Downward," he said. "That way lies the heart of the forges. Thamior's strength will be rooted there, where the old fires yet burn." So they turned and followed the lower path. The walls widened into a vast cavern, and the light grew stronger. A deep red glow that shimmered upon the metal veins threading the rock. In the center of the chamber stood a black pillar, cracked from age but still pulsing faintly with inner heat. Around it were scattered tools of strange design, hammers, tongs, and molds, shaped for works long forgotten. Gandalf knelt beside one of the molds and brushed the dust from its surface. It was etched with symbols he recognized, the same craft signs once used by Celebrimbor and his kin. "This place," he said softly, "was the first forge, where the elves began their great work before Sauron came among them. Much of their skill was pure then, untouched by deceit." Arvain glanced warily toward the pillar, and now that purity is tainted." "Aye," said Gandalf, "the shadow crept even into beauty as it ever does." As he spoke, the pillar gave a sudden pulse, and the red light brightened. A faint tremor ran through the ground, and the molten streams quivered. The Dunedain drew their swords at once. "Do not fear," said Gandalf. "He cannot strike in full strength yet, but he feels our presence, and will not suffer us to reach his heart unopposed." At that moment, from the dark tunnel behind them, came a low, echoing growl. The sound of stone grinding against stone. The men turned swiftly, blades raised. Out of the shadow lumbered shapes that glowed faintly with inner fire. Stone figures, wrought in the likeness of smiths, their faces expressionless, their hands clutching blackened tools. "The Watchers of the Forges," murmured Gandalf. "Thamior has woken them." The stone-forged guardians advanced, their steps heavy enough to shake the floor. Arvain leapt forward, his sword flashing, and struck one across the arm. The blade bit deep, but sparks burst forth and molten light spilled from the wound. The creature reeled, but did not fall. Gandalf lifted his staff and cried out in a voice of power. A white flame burst forth, sweeping through the chamber. The guardians halted, blinded by the blaze. Gandalf strode forward, striking the ground with his staff, and the floor split, sending a wave of light surging across the stone. When the brightness faded, the guardians stood frozen, cracks spreading through their bodies. Then one by one they shattered into fragments that glowed briefly before crumbling into dust. The chamber fell still again. The air reeked of smoke and old fire. Gandalf leaned upon his staff, his breath deep but steady. "He tests us," he said, "but these were but echoes, shadows, given form. His true strength lies below." They pressed onward, following the molten streams that wound deeper still into the earth. At length they came to a great doorway of black iron, its surface carved with strange spirals that moved like living things in the torchlight. The metal was warm beneath Gandalf's hand. "Beyond this lies the Master Forge," he said. "If Thamior still works, it will be here." He raised his staff and touched the door. With a sound like thunder, it swung open, revealing a vast hall ablaze with red light. The walls were lined with forges, each filled with molten metal that bubbled and hissed, though no hands tended them. Chains hung from the ceiling, and the air shimmered with heat. At the far end of the hall stood a massive anvil, and upon it lay a fragment of black metal that pulsed with a deep crimson glow. Gandalf's eyes widened as he beheld it. "The remnant of a ring," he said, "a piece torn from one of the lesser works of the Myrdain. Thamior means to forge it anew." A voice rose from the shadows above, cold and resonant. "You see truly, Old One. The fire remembers its shape, and through it I shall return." The darkness gathered and coalesced, taking once more the form of Thamior. This time his figure was clearer, his edges sharper, as if the forge's heat had given him strength. His hammer gleamed red as blood, and his eyes burned with white fire. "You meddle again in the labors of others," Thamior said. "Is it your purpose to smother every spark that seeks to rise in this world?" "It is my purpose," said Gandalf, "to see that none burn the world anew." Thamior raised his hammer high, and the forges flared. Chains snapped from the walls and whirled through the air like serpents. The Dunedain scattered, striking at them as they flew, while Gandalf stood his ground before the anvil. With a cry, Thamior hurled the hammer down. Gandalf met it with his staff, and once more light and shadow clashed in a storm of fire. The chamber quaked, and the molten streams surged like rivers in flood. Sparks filled the air, and the roar of their struggle echoed through every hall of the ancient city. At last Gandalf thrust forward his staff, and a beam of pure white light pierced the shadow. Thamior staggered, his form flickering like a dying flame. "You cannot destroy me," he cried. "I am fire itself. The world was born in flame, and in flame it shall end." "Then may that fire be returned to its source," said Gandalf. He struck the anvil with the staff, and the forge exploded in light. The black fragment upon it melted, flowing like liquid night into the cracks of the stone. Thamior screamed, a sound that shook the very mountain, and his form dissolved, drawn into the molten glow. The hall blazed brighter than day, then went dark. When the light faded, Gandalf stood alone beside the ruined anvil. The Dunedain rose from where they had been thrown, dazed but alive. The fires were gone, only the slow drip of cooling metal echoed in the silence. "He is gone," said Arvain. "For now," Gandalf answered softly, "but such spirits do not die. He has fled deeper yet, into the bones of the world, and if we are to end his fire forever, we must follow." He looked toward the black tunnel beyond the forges, where the air shimmered faintly with heat. Beyond that path lies the root of his power, and the heart of Eragian's doom. And so, weary but resolute, they pressed on into the deepest dark, where no light of sun or moon had ever reached, and where the oldest fires of the world still burned unseen. Down into the roots of the mountains they went, where the earth's own fire whispered beneath their feet. The air was thick with heat and silence, and the walls glowed faintly with veins of molten stone. The company moved in single file, each man's breath loud in his own ears. Gandalf walked at the front, his staff casting a pale light that cut through the gloom. Behind him came Arvain and his two companions, weary yet steadfast. The passage seemed endless. Once, long ago, these tunnels had been carved by elven hands, but time and ruin had twisted them. The carvings upon the walls were half melted, and strange symbols, neither elvish nor dwarven, glimmered faintly as if alive. Now and then, the men thought they heard faint sounds, whispers perhaps, or the slow beat of a hidden forge. At last they reached a vast cavern so wide that Gandalf's light barely touched the farthest edge. The ceiling was lost in shadow. In the center rose a mound of stone, black and glassy as obsidian, and around it the ground was cracked and burning. A faint red mist hung in the air, moving as if it breathed. "This," Gandalf said quietly, "is the deep forge, the oldest of all. Here the elven smiths drew upon the fire at the world's heart. It was this very place that Sauron found when he came among them, and from it he shaped the craft that would enslave them." Arvain gazed at the mound. "And now Thamior seeks to master it." Gandalf nodded. "Aye, the fire here is not of this age. It is a remnant of the flame imperishable, the secret spark that made the world. Even a fallen Maya might draw strength from it." They moved closer. The heat grew fierce, and the stone hissed underfoot. At the mound's summit stood a great ring of iron, half buried in the rock. Through its center burned a dull red light, pulsing like a heart. Gandalf's expression darkened. "The forge lives," he murmured. "He is within it." Before he could speak further, the ground trembled. From the mound burst a gout of flame, and out of it rose Thamior once more. His form was no longer shadow, but fire given shape. A tall, terrible figure, his face wreathed in smoke, his eyes blazing white. His hammer was gone, and in its place his hands burned like molten metal. "So," he said, his voice echoing through the cavern like thunder, "you come again to break what you do not understand." Gandalf stood firm, though the heat scorched his robes. "You speak of understanding, yet you would unmake the world to feed your pride. The flame was not given for dominion, Thamior, but for creation. You twist it to ruin." Thamior's laughter filled the chamber. "You call it ruin. I call it renewal. The old order fades. The elves depart, the dwarves hide, and men bicker over kingdoms of dust. But I shall forge anew, the world shall burn clean, and from the ashes rise stronger, brighter, purer." "The fire you crave would consume even you," said Gandalf. "There's no strength in destruction, only emptiness." "Then let us see whose fire endures." With a roar, Thamior thrust his hands into the forge. The ground split open, and rivers of molten rock burst forth, spilling across the cavern. The Dunedain cried out, retreating to the higher ledges. Gandalf raised his staff, calling out words in the tongue of the Valar. A blinding white light flared around him, and the molten streams parted, hissing where they struck the radiance. The two powers met, white flame and red, clashing in a storm of heat and light. Sparks fell like rain, and the air shook with the sound of thunder. Gandalf's voice rose strong and terrible, and Thamior's laughter turned to a snarl. "You cannot contain me," the spirit cried. "You are bound by flesh. I am the flame unfettered." "Then be bound again," Gandalf answered, "by the will that made the fire you now defy." He struck the ground with his staff, and the mound split apart. From the cleft burst a column of pure light, white as the stars before the world was made. Thamior screamed, his form writhing as the light engulfed him. His fiery body flickered, tearing at its edges like a banner in a storm. Still he fought, and the cavern quaked. The roof began to crumble, stones falling in torrents. Gandalf staggered but did not falter. His eyes shone like lightning. "Begone, Thamior," he cried. "Return to the void from whence you were cast." With a final shriek, the spirit burst apart. Fire and shadow flew upward, vanishing into the black vault above. The light of the forge dimmed, and the red glow faded to ash. For a moment, there was only silence. A silence so deep it seemed the mountain itself had ceased to breathe. Then Gandalf fell to one knee, his staff flickering weakly. Arvain rushed to his side, helping him stand. "Is it done?" he asked. Gandalf nodded wearily. "He is cast down, yet his essence lingers, deep in the roots. He cannot rise again, not soon. But such spirits are never wholly gone." The cavern was collapsing around them. Cracks spread through the floor, and jets of steam burst from the stone. "We must flee!" cried one of the Dunedain. "Quickly!" said Gandalf. "This place will not endure." They ran through the falling ruin, following the winding tunnels upward. The walls trembled, and heat seared their faces. At one turn, the passage collapsed behind them, sealing off the way they had come. They pressed onward, lungs burning, until at last a breath of cool air touched their faces. Light, faint but true, appeared ahead. They burst forth into the open night, stumbling out upon the broken plain of a region. Behind them, the ground heaved, and a plume of fire rose from the earth, casting a red glow over the ruined land. Then, With a rumble that echoed across the hills, the fires sank back into silence. The stars shone above, untouched by the turmoil below. Gandalf stood long in silence, his face lifted to the heavens. His robes were scorched, his staff cracked, but his eyes were calm. Arwen came to his side. "It is over then," he said. "For now," Gandalf replied. "The fires of the world are deep. Some sleep for an age and then stir again when memory fades. But this one will trouble Middle-earth no longer." The Dunedain bowed their heads. "You have our thanks, Mithrandir," said Arwen. "Few among men will ever know what you have done here." Gandalf smiled faintly. "That is as it should be. The world has had enough of fire and fear. Let peace grow where ruin stood." They made camp upon the hillside, watching the smoke drift from the valley below. Dawn came, cool and fair, and with it a quiet that seemed almost holy. Yet as Gandalf gazed upon the sunrise, he felt a strange weight in his heart, not sorrow but finality. His work in Middle-earth was nearly ended. The last embers of the old darkness were fading, and his own time too was passing into legend. He turned his eyes westward toward the distant sea where white shores waited beyond the horizon. And though he said nothing, the wind seemed to carry a whisper, farewell and the promise of rest. Still, for that one dawn upon the ruins of Eregion, Gandalf the White stood watch over a world made free of fire, and the ancient land was silent once more. The sun climbed higher above the silent ruins, and its light spilled like gold across the broken stones of Eregion. Smoke still curled from the blackened earth where the deep forge had been sealed, yet already the land seemed quieter, emptied of the restless heat that had haunted it for ages. The Dunedain made ready to depart, though none spoke loudly, as if fearing to disturb the uneasy calm. Gandalf stood apart from the camp, his hand resting upon the white head of Shadowfax. His gaze lingered on the valley below, where the last wisps of steam drifted upward like pale ghosts. The weariness of many ages pressed upon him, yet within his heart stirred a strange peace, the kind that comes when a great labor has been fulfilled. Arwen approached, his cloak torn and his face streaked with ash. "We have gathered what supplies remain," he said. "The road north is open again. Will you ride with us to the angle?" Gandalf smiled faintly. "For a while, perhaps. My road runs west, as it ever has, but the time has not yet come." Arwen inclined his head. "Then we shall be honored by your company." They left the ruins behind before noon, riding across the wide plain of Holland where the grass had begun to grow again in patches of green. The air was cool, washed clean by the winds that came from the sea. Yet even in the brightness of day, Gandalf felt the deep echo of what lay beneath. The faint hum of the buried forges, the whisper of power that had once defied the will of the Valar. By evening they came to the northern hills, where an ancient road wound through heather and stone. There they made camp, and the stars came out bright above them. The Dunedain, though hardy men, were quiet and watchful, for strange dreams had come upon them since they had left the valley. One murmured in his sleep of fire beneath the mountains, and another awoke crying that he had heard the ring of a hammer far away. Gandalf kept watch through the night, his staff planted beside him, and his eyes upon the fire. In the stillness he thought of the long ages that had passed, of the elves who had built Eregion, of Celebrimbor's pride and Sauron's deceit, of the many shadows that had risen and fallen since the making of the rings. And he knew then that though Thamior was cast down, the memory of his fire would remain, buried in the bones of the world, waiting for hearts foolish enough to seek it again. When dawn came, they broke camp and rode northward. The land rose slowly, and before midday they reached the edge of a forest, a remnant of the old woods that had once stretched across Eriador. The trees stood tall and dark, their trunks gray with age. As they entered beneath the canopy, the light dimmed, and a hush fell over the company. "This wood was once watched by the elves of Erigion," said Gandalf. "Few of their kind have passed this way since the war, yet their presence lingers. Walk with respect." The Dunedain nodded, for even the simplest of men could feel that the forest was not empty. Faint voices seemed to whisper in the leaves, and a soft light moved through the shadows, like the glow of stars hidden among the branches. By evening they came to a glade where an ancient oak stood alone, its roots twisting deep into the earth. Gandalf halted and dismounted. "We will rest here," he said. "There is something I must seek." The others made camp while Gandalf walked alone to the oak. He laid his hand upon its trunk and closed his eyes. For a long time he stood thus, silent and still. Then he spoke softly in the elven tongue, and the earth before him stirred. A small stone rose from the ground, smooth and round, carved with a single rune of light. Arven came forward, wonder on his face. "What is it?" "A seal," said Gandalf, "set here long ago by the elves of Hollin. It binds the land, keeping what was dark from spreading. When Thamior's fire rose, the seal weakened. Now it must be renewed." He knelt and pressed his hand over the stone, speaking words older than any tongue of men. Light shone from his palm, spreading in slender lines through the soil like roots of silver. The forest seemed to breathe. Leaves trembled, though no wind stirred them, and the very air shimmered with quiet power. When the light faded, Gandalf rose, his expression grave but content. "It is done. The land will heal now, though it will take time. Erision will never be as it was, but it will no longer fester with old fire." That night, as the stars wheeled slowly overhead, Gandalf sat apart once more. The Dunedain slept peacefully for the first time in many days, but he remained wakeful, listening to the night. From far away came the sound of water over stone, the soft murmur of a stream newly freed from the earth, and with it came a scent he had not known since the elder days, the clean fragrance of growing things after long barrenness. He smiled then, faint and wistful. "So even ruin may bloom again," he murmured. At dawn they rode north and soon came to the edge of the wood, where the land fell away into the long valleys of Eriador. Beyond them the road ran toward Bree, and far beyond that lay the Shire, green and quiet, untouched by the great struggles of the world. Gandalf's heart lightened at the thought, for he had long loved those small lands where laughter outlasted sorrow. At a fork in the road the company halted. Arven turned to Gandalf. "Here our paths divide," he said. "We go east to our watch in the wild, but your road leads elsewhere." "Indeed," Gandalf said, smiling. "Go in peace, sons of the North. The world will not soon forget your courage, though few may ever know of it." Arvain bowed low. "If ever you pass our way again, you will find welcome." With that they parted. The Dunedain rode eastward, fading into the rising sun, while Gandalf turned west toward the blue mountains. Shadowfax carried him swiftly over the wide plains, and by nightfall he saw the peaks, gleaming faintly under the stars. He camped beside a stream that sang softly through the heather. The firelight flickered across his face, and he sat long into the night, his thoughts wandering far. The memory of Thamior's fall lingered still. The sight of that flame vanishing into the depths, the sound of the forge breaking. Yet deeper still was the knowledge that such fires would never wholly fade, for they were part of the world's making. But Gandalf was no longer troubled by it. The task was done, and the burden of care that had lain upon him for so long grew lighter with every step westward. Soon, he knew, he would come to the gray havens where others awaited him, Galadriel, Elrond, and the last of the wise, and beyond them the white shores of the undying lands. He closed his eyes, and the wind rose softly, carrying with it the faintest scent of salt from the sea. The sound of the waves was still far off, but he heard it all the same. The promise of peace after a long road, well traveled. And so, beneath the first light of dawn, Gandalf the White rode on through the quiet lands of the West, leaving behind the ruins of the ancient world and bearing with him the last echoes of its fire, a memory of both peril and glory, fading now into legend. The wind of the western lands was cool and filled with the scent of the sea. Gandalf rode swiftly across the downs, the tall grasses bending before Shadowfax's hooves. The road ran white beneath the sunlight, winding toward the distant hills that marked the borders of Lindon, the last of the ancient elven realms in Middle-earth. The days passed quietly, one after another, each softer than the last. The world seemed to rest after long turmoil. Villages lay at peace, their chimneys sending lazy smoke into the morning sky, and shepherds lifted their hands in greeting as Gandalf rode by. Few knew his name, though they felt some quiet awe at his passing, as though the wind itself bore tidings of old power and deep wisdom. At times Gandalf would pause upon the road and gaze behind him. Far away, the blue haze of the misty mountains still rose above the horizon. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay the ruins of Eregion, buried now beneath cooling stone. He thought of the Dunedain who had ridden with him, brave men who guarded forgotten borders and would vanish one day into history, their names remembered only in old songs. Yet for all the peace of the land, Gandalf's heart was not wholly free. Though the shadow of Sauron was gone and Thamior's fire quenched, the wizard knew that the world had changed beyond recall. The elves were leaving. Their havens were silent, their ships few. The age of men had come, and with it a kind of loneliness, for the beauty and power of the elder days were fading like the last light of sunset. He camped one night upon a green hill that overlooked the Gulf of Lun. There, beneath a canopy of stars, he sat by a small fire and smoked his pipe, the sweet scent of the Shire's leaf rising into the night. His thoughts drifted to those far lands, to Bag End, to laughter beneath the party tree, to simple hearts that had borne great burdens. He smiled then, and the lines of care upon his face softened. "They have peace at last," he murmured, "and that is well." When morning came, Gandalf rode down from the hills and entered the woods of Lindon. The trees there were ancient and silver gray, their leaves glimmering in the sunlight like small mirrors of the sea. The air was filled with bird song, light and clear, and the paths were smooth, tended still by unseen hands. At length he came to the banks of the Lune, where stood the white towers of Mithlond, the gray havens. The harbor lay quiet beneath the morning sky, and upon the waters rocked a few slender ships, their sails furled their masts crowned with banners that shimmered faintly in the light. Waiting upon the quay stood an elf, clad in silver and blue. His hair was dark as polished steel, and his face bore the calm of long years. When he saw Gandalf approach, he bowed with grave courtesy. "Hail, Mithrandir," said he. "Long have we awaited your coming." Gandalf inclined his head in return. "And long have I tarried, Círdan," he answered, for indeed it was the shipwright himself who stood before him. "But now the last of my labors is ended. The fire beneath the mountains sleeps, and no dark hand stirs it." Círdan's eyes shone softly. "So the circles of the world close once more. The storm is past, and the sea lies calm again. Will you take ship soon?" Gandalf looked westward, where the horizon met the glittering waters. "Soon," he said, "but not yet. There is still light upon these shores, and I would behold it a while before it fades." Círdan smiled faintly. "You are ever one to linger where hope yet dwells. Come then, rest a while in my halls, and let your heart be eased." So Gandalf entered the havens of the elves, where tall halls of white stone rose beside the sea, and gardens bloomed with flowers that had first grown in Valinor. There he found peace for many days, walking among the trees and watching the ships being built upon the quays. The sea wind played through his hair, and the sound of the waves seemed to wash away the last weariness of the long years. One evening, as the sun sank red into the west, Gandalf stood upon the pier and watched the light glimmer on the water. The tide lapped softly against the stones, and gulls wheeled overhead, crying in the golden air. Círdan came beside him, silent for a while, and then spoke. "Your work here is finished, old friend. The world will move now by its own strength. Will you not take your place among the others across the sea?" Gandalf turned to him and smiled, though there was sorrow in his eyes. "I will, but there is something I must do first. One last errand, small perhaps, but dear to my heart." Círdan inclined his head. "Then go with my blessing. The ship will wait, as it has waited long." The next morning Gandalf mounted Shadowfax once more and rode eastward from the havens. He did not tell Círdan where he went, but his heart knew the road. Through the rolling downs and quiet woods he journeyed until at last the land grew green and gentle once more. It was the Shire he sought, that fair corner of Middle-earth, untouched by the great wars of kings and powers. When he came to its borders, the autumn leaves were falling, and the air smelled of harvest and hearth smoke. Children laughed along the lanes, and the sound of their joy was music to his ears. He passed unseen among them, though a few, sensing something bright and strange, looked up in wonder as he went by. At last he came to a hill, beneath which a round green door stood half hidden by ivy. There he paused, smiling, and touched the door with his hand. "Sleep well, my dear friends," he said softly. "The world is safe, and your part in its song will never be forgotten." He lingered a while beneath the party tree, watching the sunset spread across the fields. Then, as twilight deepened, he turned away and mounted Shadowfax again. Without haste they rode west, through quiet meadows and over gentle hills, until the stars came out and the road shone pale beneath their hooves. The sea wind met them once more, carrying with it the distant cry of gulls. Gandalf lifted his head and his eyes shone. "It is time," he said. And so, as the first stars rose above the western sea, Gandalf returned to the Grey Havens. The ship awaited him, white and gleaming, its sails unfurled like wings of light Upon the deck stood Galadriel and Elrond, their faces radiant in the starlight, and beside them a small figure, Frodo Baggins, who smiled when he saw him approach. "Come, Gandalf," said Galadriel, her voice soft as the sea breeze. "The road is ended." Gandalf looked once more upon Middle-earth, the mountains, the rivers, the sleeping lands. Then he stepped aboard, and the ship slipped quietly from the quay. The wind filled its sails, and the light upon the water deepened to silver. Behind them the world of men lay dreaming beneath the stars, and ahead, beyond the shadowed horizon, the white shores shone faint and far, the undying lands where no shadow could ever reach again. Thus ended the last journey of Gandalf the White, servant of the secret fire, bearer of the flame of Anor, and guardian of Middle-earth. And though his passing was gentle and unseen by most, the world was forever changed, for the last light of the elder days had sailed into the west, leaving behind the dawn of a new age. The ship sailed westward upon the wide and shining sea, gliding like a swan through silver mist. The wind was soft and steady, filling the white sails with a sound like distant singing. Behind them, Middle-earth fell slowly away, its shores fading beneath the gathering haze. Gandalf stood upon the deck, his staff in hand, his eyes fixed upon the horizon where the sun sank into the great expanse of water. The sea was unlike any he had known, deep beyond measure, and filled with strange lights that flickered beneath the surface like stars caught in the tide. Now and again he heard faint echoes, voices half remembered from long ago, the laughter of the Ainur before the shaping of the world, the music of the Valar when the seas were first made. It seemed to him that all things were drawing together once more, bound by a single, endless song. Galadriel stood nearby, her white hair glimmering in the dusk. She too looked westward, and her face was calm, though her eyes were full of memories. Beside her stood Elrond, tall and grave, and Frodo leaned upon the rail, silent, watching the waves. For a time no one spoke, for words seemed small and fleeting beside the majesty of the sea. At last Frodo turned to Gandalf. "Will it be long?" he asked softly. Gandalf smiled, and his eyes shone with warmth. "Not long, my dear hobbit. The road is shorter now than ever it was, and its end is fair beyond all telling. You will see the light of the undying lands soon enough." Frodo nodded and said no more. His hand rested upon his breast where once the ring had hung, and though the wound still ached faintly, it no longer burned. The shadow that had lain upon him was lifting, carried away with the wind and the salt spray. Night fell. The stars came out bright and clear, far brighter than those seen from Middle-earth. They seemed alive, their light dancing upon the waves like jewels scattered upon the sea. The travelers gathered upon the deck, speaking quietly of old days. Elrond spoke of Rivendell and the long years of waiting, of hope and loss, and the memory of the First Age. Galadriel told tales of Valinor before the darkening, when the two trees still shone, and Gandalf, smiling, spoke of small things, of pipeweed and fireworks, and laughter in a hobbit's garden. Frodo listened, his heart full. He thought of Sam, of Merry and Pippin, of the Shire with its green hills and simple joys. "They will live well," he whispered. "They will keep the gardens blooming and the fields bright." "They will," said Gandalf gently, "and their days will be long and good. Do not grieve for them, Frodo. The world has need of such hearts. You have done your part, and more." The The ship sailed on through the night, and when dawn came, the sky was filled with colors beyond imagining, silver and rose and pale gold, as if the morning itself were newly made. The air was sweet, carrying the scent of something pure and unchanging. Ahead, the mist began to thin, and through it shone a light, not harsh or blinding, but soft and living, like the glow of dawn upon clear water. Galadriel's eyes brightened, and her voice rose in song, clear as the ringing of crystal. Elrond joined her, and then Gandalf, their voices weaving together in harmony, a hymn older than time. Even the sea seemed to sing with them, and the sound filled every heart with wonder. Frodo clutched the rail, his breath catching. "I see it," he whispered, "white shores, and beyond them, a far green country under a swift sunrise." "Yes," Gandalf said, his voice full of quiet joy. "You have come home." The ship glided onward. The light grew brighter, and at last the travelers beheld the coast of the Undying Lands. Tall cliffs of white stone rising from emerald meadows, and beyond them, woods of silver and gold. Waterfalls tumbled from the heights, and rivers ran down to meet the sea, shining like threads of crystal. Birds with wings like flame wheeled above, their songs mingling with the murmur of the waves. The ship came to rest beside a small harbor where the water shone as clear as glass. Upon the shore stood figures tall and radiant, their garments white as snow. They were the elves who had gone before, kindred long sundered, now reunited at last. As the travelers disembarked, sweet music rose to greet them, and the air was filled with joy. Galadriel was the first to step ashore. The elves bowed before her, and she smiled, her eyes alight with both pride and sorrow. Elrond followed, his face softened by peace. Then came Frodo, and as his feet touched the sand, a great stillness came over him. The pain in his heart was gone. The weight he had carried for so long was lifted. He stood in wonder, tears shining in his eyes. Gandalf came last, his white robes gleaming in the morning light. As he stepped upon the shore, the sea seemed to hush, as if in reverence. The tall elves bowed deeply before him, for they knew him not merely as the Grey Pilgrim, but as one of the Maiar. Olorin, servant of the Valar, who had come long ago to Middle-earth, in humility and wisdom. One of the radiant figures came forward, a tall being robed in blue and silver, whose face shone like the morning star. "Welcome home, Olorin," he said. "Long have you labored in the lands of men and elves, and your task is well ended. Come, the lords of the West await you." Gandalf bowed. "I am but a humble servant," he said, though his eyes glimmered with a light that was not of the mortal world. "Yet my heart is glad to return. Long have I walked beneath the weight of shadow, and now I see the light of the beginning once more." They walked together through gardens more fair than any in Middle-earth, where trees of silver leaves grew beside pools that mirrored the sky. The air was filled with music, and every step seemed to bring healing and peace. Frodo laughed for the first time in many years, and the sound was bright and clear. At length they came to a high hill, from which all the land could be seen. The sea behind them, the mountains ahead, and between them a valley of eternal green. Gandalf stood there long, his heart full of quiet joy. He thought of all he had seen, of fire and ruin, of courage and hope, and knew that every tear, every burden had been worth the journey. He turned to Frodo and laid a hand upon his shoulder. "Rest now," he said softly. "Your road is ended, and peace is yours." "And you, Gandalf?" Frodo asked. "I will rest too," said Gandalf, smiling. for even the servants of the secret fire must one day lay down their work. But know this, dear hobbit, the story does not end. The light goes ever on, and life follows it unending. The wind rose, carrying with it the scent of the sea and the faint echo of laughter from far below. The sun climbed high, and its light spread across the fair land of Valinor, where sorrow was no more. And there, upon the white shores of the west, the gray pilgrim at last found his peace, and the world beyond the sea shone forever in his heart like a memory of the first dawn. The white shores lay quiet beneath the light of an unsetting sun. A golden haze drifted across the fields of Valinor, soft as morning mist, and every blade of grass shimmered as if woven of living light. The air itself seemed to sing, low and distant, like a memory too beautiful to fade. Gandalf walked slowly along the coast, his staff in hand, though he needed it no longer. The sea whispered beside him, and the wind played gently in his hair. For the first time since he'd come into the world of men and elves, he felt no weight upon his heart. There was no shadow to resist, no darkness to pursue, only peace, vast, deep, and unending. Behind him lay the harbor, where the ship had come to rest. It gleamed like a jewel upon the water, and beside it walked elves of the blessed realm, tall, bright beings whose laughter mingled with the waves. Frodo was among them, and though Gandalf could no longer see him from where he stood, he knew that the hobbit's heart was light at last. The small one who had borne so heavy a burden now walked in joy among immortals, his pain healed, his spirit whole. Gandalf turned from the sea and made his way inland. Before him rose a path of white stone, winding through meadows of silver grass. As he walked, he saw the land spread wide and fair, hills crowned with flowering trees, rivers glimmering like molten glass, and far away the shadowless mountains where the light of the two trees once mingled in ages past. He met no sorrow here. Even the silence was full of life, and every step seemed to bring him closer to the heart of creation itself. Yet in that peace, Gandalf's mind was not idle. He thought of Middle-earth, of the lands he had left behind, and of those who still dwelt there. He thought of Aragorn, now King Elisar of Gondor, whose reign had brought unity to the kingdoms of men. He saw in his mind the white city gleaming in the sun, banners of silver and blue unfurled upon the walls. He saw Arwen beside him, her dark hair crowned with light, and though her choice had cost her immortality, her face was serene. Their line would endure for many generations, and Middle-earth would know an age of peace. He thought of the Shire, green and untouched, where Samwise now tended his garden beside Bag End. Children would grow there who knew nothing of the ring or the shadows that once crept across the world. And that was well. The great wars of old would become stories, legends told beside fires in winter when the wind moaned beyond the round doors. Gandalf smiled as he walked. The world of men would change, and the elves would fade, but life would endure. That was the way of things. The music still played, and its melody was ever moving forward. At length he came to a grove of tall trees, whose leaves were pale as moonlight. Beneath them flowed a stream that shone like liquid crystal. There, upon a smooth stone beside the water, sat a figure robed in white, his hair like silver rain. Gandalf halted, for he knew him at once. It was Manwë, the elder king, Lord of the air, who sat in peace beneath the open sky. The Vala rose and greeted him with a smile that seemed to illuminate the very air. "Welcome home, Olorin," he said. "Long have you labored under the sun, and faithfully have you fulfilled the task for which you were sent." Gandalf bowed low. "My lord," he said humbly, "I have done what I could, though little enough it seems, beside the vastness of the world." "Little?" said Manwë, his voice like the sound of wind among mountains. "You have done much, and more than was asked of you. In humility you came, clothed in weakness, to guide rather than rule, to kindle courage in others rather than wield power yourself. Such was ever the truest strength." Gandalf bowed his head, and for a moment he said nothing. Then softly he asked, "And what of Middle-earth now? Will its light endure?" "It will," said Manwë, "for a time. The dominion of men has come, and though it will bring both shadow and splendor, the world will not be unmade. The music continues, and though the notes change, the harmony remains. Your part in it is finished, yet its song goes on." A deep peace filled Gandalf's heart. "Then I am content," he said, "for that was ever my hope." Manwë's eyes shone kindly upon him. "Rest now, servant of the secret fire. You have wandered long upon mortal shores. Let the light of the west heal what time has worn." And with a gesture he bade Gandalf follow him deeper into the grove. There the air grew still, and a soft radiance shone among the trees. The sound of the stream faded, and Gandalf felt the weariness of countless years fall from him like a cloak. He came to a pool of still water, its surface bright as glass. "Behold," said Manwë, "the mirror of the west. Here you may see not as the mortals see, but as we see, the whole of what was, what is, and what shall yet come." Gandalf looked into the water. For a moment he saw the lands of Middle-earth spread out before him, the mountains, the forests, the rivers winding to the sea. He saw men building cities, ships sailing west, children laughing in the sunlight. He saw the Shire in bloom, and Sam's hand planting a new sapling before Bag End. Then the vision shifted, and he saw ages yet to come, shadows and light interwoven, kingdoms rising and falling, the world changing shape beneath the stars. But through it all there ran a single thread of light, unbroken, shining ever brighter. At last the vision faded, and the pool grew still. Gandalf turned away, his eyes glimmering. "It is good," he said quietly. "All things come and pass, yet the light remains." Manwë smiled. "So it has ever been." Then Gandalf bowed once more and left the grove. The sun had climbed higher, and the air was sweet. He walked down to a small hill overlooking the sea, where a stone bench stood amid flowering vines. There he sat, watching the waves roll in upon the white sand. Birds flew overhead, their wings catching the sunlight, and somewhere far off the sound of singing drifted through the air. The voices of the elves, welcoming another evening of endless peace. Gandalf closed his eyes. For a long time he listened, and the song of the world rose around him. The sea, the wind, the laughter of immortal souls. All the burdens of his long journey were gone. He was no longer the weary pilgrim, nor the keeper of the Ring of Fire, nor even the White Rider. He was Olorin once more, spirit of light and wisdom, at peace within the harmony of creation. And so he sat as the sun dipped low, and the sky deepened into gold and rose. The sea turned to silver, the stars awoke, and Valinor lay bathed in the glow of everlasting twilight. Far across the waters, unseen and unheeded, Middle-earth slept beneath the same stars. Its people dreamed, and the world turned gently toward another dawn. But upon that fair and deathless shore, the wizard's long watch was ended, and the light that had guided countless hearts across shadow and despair burned now in eternal rest. A long age seemed to pass in peace, though time in Valinor was not measured as in the mortal lands. Days came and went like the ebb of the tide, and the light of the west never waned. Gandalf, or rather Olorin, as he was now known again among his own kind, dwelt in quiet joy beneath the silver boughs of the western hills. There where the air was sweet and the meadows shone with dew that glimmered like stars, he found a rest that mortal hearts could not imagine. He often walked beside the sea, watching the waves roll in endless rhythm upon the white sand. Sometimes he spoke with Frodo, who came often to sit beside him upon the shore. The hobbit's face was fair again, his eyes clear and bright, yet they held a gentle depth, as though he still carried memory of all he had seen. "Do you miss it?" Frodo asked one evening as the two sat watching the sky turn to gold. "The old world, the Shire, the laughter of friends, the smell of rain upon green fields?" Olorin smiled, and the lines upon his face softened. "I do," he said. "Memory is a kind of flame that never dies. But do not mistake remembrance for longing. What we love in the mortal world, we carry with us, Frodo. It is not lost. Here all things that were good are gathered and made whole." Frodo nodded thoughtfully. "Then it is enough." "It is," said Olorin, "though even now my heart listens eastward. For though I am at peace, I cannot wholly forget the song of the world I served. It still plays, faint and far, and sometimes I hear its echoes upon the wind." They sat long after that until the stars came out, brighter here than anywhere else. The sea shone with their reflection, and Frodo fell silent, resting his head upon his knees. At last Olorin rose, placing a hand upon his shoulder. "Rest, my friend," he said. "Your road has been long, but it ends in light." Frodo smiled faintly, and his eyes closed. The sound of the sea lulled him to sleep, and Olorin walked on alone beneath the stars. He wandered inland through fields of white lilies and groves of golden-leaved trees. In the distance rose the mountains of Valinor, their peaks veiled in light. It was said that beyond them lay the halls of the Valar, the powers of the West, and though few walked there unbidden, Olorin was often called to their council. So it was upon the following day. As the first rays of dawn broke across the land, a white eagle descended from the heights, its wings spanning the sky. It alighted before him and spoke in a voice like the wind. "Manwë calls you, Olorin, wisest of the Maiar. Come to the heights, for he would speak with you concerning the world beyond the sea." Olorin bowed. "I will come." The eagle bore him upward through clouds of gold until they reached the high places where the air itself was light. There stood a great hall open to the sky, its pillars wrought of marble and crystal, and within it sat Manwë upon his throne, Varda beside him, her eyes bright as the first stars. "Welcome, Olorin," said Manwë, his voice deep and gentle. "Long has it been since we spoke of the world beyond the sea. Tell us now, what do you see of it in your heart?" Olorin bowed low. "I see that the shadow is gone, my lord, yet I also see the stirrings of change. Men grow strong, and their kingdoms spread far. The elves have passed into the west, and dwarves hide deep in their mountains. The world is quieter, yet the old fire still lies hidden, for good or ill. It is as it ever was, the balance between light and dark, courage and pride." Varda spoke then, her voice like the music of falling water. "And does this trouble you, Olorin?" He looked up at her and smiled. No, my lady, it is the way of things. The flame that burns within the hearts of men is wild, but it was meant to be. Their choices will shape the ages to come as ours once did. My part in their tale is done. Manwë inclined his head. So be it. Yet the valor will not forget what you have done, nor the care with which you guided the children of Ilúvatar. Many would have sought dominion, but you chose the humbler road. Thus you became greater than many who were mightier. A soft light filled the hall, and the voices of unseen choirs rose faintly in song. Olorin felt no pride, only gratitude, for he knew that all his labors, his struggles, and his sorrows had been but one small part of the great music that bound the world together. When the song faded, Manwë rose. "Go now," he said, "walk among the fair lands of a man, and take joy in the peace you have earned. The world beyond will endure its own fate, but here the light shall never dim." Olorin bowed once more and departed. The eagle bore him down again to the green meadows by the sea, where Frodo and others of the West walked among the flowers. There were elves there of every kindred, Noldor and Vanyar, Teleri and Sindar, singing together beneath the sunlight. He found Frodo by a small stream, weaving a garland of white blossoms. "You were gone long," said the hobbit, smiling. "Was it counsel with the powers?" "It was," said Olorin, "and it brought me peace. The world beyond is safe, Frodo, though its path will turn as all paths do, but its song still reaches even here." Frodo looked up at him. "Then you will listen to it still?" "Always," said Olorin, "for the music of creation never ceases, and though we rest in the West, our hearts are still bound to all that was and is." They walked then to the edge of the water. The light upon the sea shimmered with hues of rose and gold. Frodo cast his garland upon the waves, and it floated gently away. As the day waned, a hush fell upon the land. The air was cool, and the stars came forth one by one, reflected in the still water. Olorin stood gazing upon them, and his heart swelled with quiet joy, for he saw in their light the reflection of all the souls he had known. Bright sparks that had risen from the fire of the world, each burning its own brief song before returning to the great harmony. He closed his eyes, and in that moment he felt all things united. The far mountains of Middle-earth, the rivers of the Shire, the ruins of Eregion, the plains of Rohan, the towers of Gondor, all bound together by the same music that had begun before time itself, and he knew that though his watch was ended, the light he had carried would never fade. It lived on in every heart that chose courage over fear, mercy over wrath, hope over despair. So Olorin the Wise, who had been Gandalf the Grey, sat long upon the shore of the West, listening to the echo of the world he had saved, until at last the stars themselves seemed to sing his name, and their song was peace unending. Seasons passed like the gentle turning of leaves. Though time in Valinor was not counted by days or years, the light that bathed the land never dimmed, nor did the winds grow cold. It was a realm beyond decay, a haven where all the sorrows of the world were stilled. Yet even in peace, Olorin found purpose, for the light that dwelt within him could not rest idle. He became a wanderer once more, though his road now wound only through the undying lands. He walked among the meadows of Eldamar, where the grass shone silver and gold, and the air was filled with songs that had been sung since the first dawn. He climbed the high hills, from which the towers of Tirion could be seen gleaming white against the horizon, and often he stood beside the fountains of the city, listening to the laughter of elves who had not known sorrow in an age. In those days, Frodo too grew hale and strong. His face was radiant and his step light as it had never been in mortal life. He would walk with Olorin beside the sea or wander with Bilbo among the blooming gardens of Lorien. The two hobbits were a wonder to the elves, who loved them for their courage and their gentle hearts. Yet Olorin saw what others could not, that the memory of Middle-earth still stirred within them both. One evening, when the sky glowed like burnished copper and the air was rich with the scent of the sea, Olorin found Frodo sitting upon a low cliff, gazing westward. Beside him lay Bilbo, fast asleep, his head pillowed on a folded cloak. The waves broke softly below, and the wind stirred Frodo's hair. "You are thoughtful, my friend," Olorin said, seating himself beside him. Frodo smiled faintly. "Always, it seems. I think of them. Sam and Merry and Pippin, they will have grown old by now. Sam's children will run through the gardens, and his hands will be brown with earth. Merry will rule the hall of Buckland, and Pippin will laugh in the sunlight of the Shire. But I wonder if they ever think of us." "They do," said Olorin gently. "The heart remembers what the mind cannot, and though you are far from them, you are not forgotten." Frodo nodded, though his eyes glistened. "Sometimes I wish I could see them again, just once. To walk in the fields of the Shire and smell the rain on the grass." Olorin laid a hand upon his shoulder. "The Shire lives within you. It is part of the greater song now, the same song that brought you here. You will see it again, though not as you remember it. All things that were fair and good in Middle-earth have a place in this land, changed but enduring." Frodo's gaze lingered on the horizon. "Then perhaps it is enough." "It is," said Olorin softly, "and more than enough." They sat long in silence until the stars came out, bright and clear, their light shimmering upon the calm waters. Bilbo stirred and yawned, blinking sleepily. "If you two are going to sit there all night, at least pass me the biscuits," he muttered. Frodo laughed, and the sound of it was pure as bells. The days that followed were filled with quiet joy. Yet even in the undying lands, change came, not in decay, but in growth. The trees of Valinor put forth new blossoms, their light deepening to richer hues. Rivers shifted their courses, carving new paths through the meadows, and in the hearts of those who dwelt there, understanding grew, a wisdom that reached beyond grief or longing. Olorin often walked alone beneath the stars, and sometimes he would climb to the highest hills, where the wind was keen and the world below lay bathed in silver light. There he would look eastward across the dark sea and listen. Faintly, very faintly, he could still hear the echo of the music, the song of Arda, ever unfolding. It was not sorrow that moved him then, but wonder. One night, as he stood upon the heights, a soft voice spoke behind him. "You listen still to the world you left." Olorin turned and beheld Varda, the queen of the stars. Her raiment shone with a radiance that no mortal eyes could endure, and her hair was like the night sky strewn with constellations. She smiled, and her presence was gentle as moonlight. "I do," Olorin said, "for though I am at rest, I cannot forget what I have seen. The flame of that world yet burns, fragile but fierce." "And so it shall," said Varda. "The music is endless, and its beauty lies in its change. The valor shaped the beginning, But it is the children who weave the song now. Each age adds its own melody. Olorin bowed his head. I am glad, for though I have seen much darkness, I have seen greater light born from it. Your part was not small, said Varda. You bore the fire of hope across shadow and despair, and because of it the world endured. Yet even now your light serves another purpose. Look. She raised her hand, and the heavens above them shimmered. A single star burned brighter than all the rest, its light spilling across the sea like a silver road. That light, said Varda, is yours, the echo of the fire you bore as Narya. It burns still to guide those who wander beneath the mortal sky. Olorin gazed upon it, awe in his eyes. Then my work truly never ends. Nothing made in love ever ends, said Varda, her voice like the soft toll of a bell. Go in peace, Olorin, and rest in joy. The world remembers and the flame endures. And with that she was gone, vanishing like starlight before dawn. Olorin stood long upon the hill, watching the silver path stretch across the sea. Then he turned and descended slowly toward the valleys below, where the lights of Valinor shimmered like jewels among the trees. The night was deep and tranquil, and the air was filled with the scent of blossoms. In the morning, Frodo and Bilbo met him by the water's edge. The hobbits were laughing, their feet bare, their arms full of flowers. Seeing them, Olorin's heart lifted, for in their joy he saw again the reflection of all that was best in Middle-earth. Courage, kindness, and love unmeasured. Come, Gandalf, cried Bilbo, using the old name with mischief in his eyes. You can't just stand there gazing at the waves. There's breakfast waiting, and if you're late, Frodo will eat the honey cakes before you get a bite. Olorin laughed, a deep, rich sound that rang like music. Then I must not delay. And together they walked back toward the sunlit gardens, the sea wind at their backs, and the sound of laughter following them through the fields. The light of the west lay golden upon their path, and the world, both mortal and eternal, seemed for that moment perfectly in tune. Every heart, every voice, part of a harmony that would never fade. Thus the days passed in Valinor, each one filled with quiet splendor. The fire that had burned through shadow now shone as a steady glow, and the wanderer at last was home. Years beyond counting had passed in the blessed realm, yet they were but a breath to those who dwelt beneath its deathless light. The trees of Valinor stirred with a music of their own, leaves whispering in a tongue older than the stars, and every stream carried with it a song that could heal the weary heart. It was a land untouched by shadow, and all who walked there moved in peace. Yet for Olorin, though his heart was full of quiet joy, there remained within him a spark of restlessness. The same spark that had carried him across the wide seas of the world. Often he would wander alone along the shining shores, where the sea murmured softly upon the white sands. There he would listen to the distant echoes of the world he had left behind, faint ripples of the great music, still unfolding beyond the bent horizon. Sometimes, when the light of evening glowed upon the waves, he thought he heard the laughter of men and the cries of gulls above the havens of Middle-earth. One such evening, as the western sky burned with hues of rose and amber, Olorin sat upon a high rock and watched the tide draw in. Frodo and Bilbo had long since gone deeper into the land, content in their rest, but he had lingered by the shore, unwilling to forsake the sound of the sea. A soft voice broke the silence. You listen still, my friend. He He turned and saw Galadriel standing behind him, robed in white and silver. The light of the trees dwelt within her eyes, and the wind caught her hair like threads of gold. "I do," he said, smiling faintly. "For though my road is ended, my heart is not yet still. There is always another song, another echo. I cannot help but hear it." She came to stand beside him, her gaze upon the far horizon. "You are as you ever were, Olorin, restless, watchful, unwilling to turn wholly from the world. It is no fault, even here beyond sorrow and death. The spirit of fire within you burns bright." Olorin's eyes softened. "The flame was never mine to keep," he said. "It was given to me for a time, and I bore it where it was needed. Yet even a small spark of it lingers still, and I cannot quench it." Galadriel smiled. "Then let it burn as it was meant to, not as a weapon against darkness, but as light for the ages to come." They stood in silence for a time, the wind playing in their hair, the sea whispering below. Then Galadriel said, "I have seen beyond the veil. The world you left grows and changes. The children of men rise and fall like waves upon the shore, yet their hearts are strong. They remember the tales of old, though they no longer name them rightly. But your name, Gandalf, endures among them, not as a shadow of fear, but as a fire of wisdom and hope." Olorin's face grew still. "Then the work was not in vain." "No work done in love ever is," said Galadriel softly. "The music goes on, and each note you struck still echoes within it." He bowed his head. "You speak truly. Yet I think I will always wonder what new songs they will weave without us." "Perhaps," she said, "we may hear them yet." They turned back toward the land, and the light of the trees shone through the mists like dawn made eternal. The air grew warm with the scent of blossoms, and a gentle peace fell upon them both. Days or ages passed thereafter, though such measures had no meaning in Valinor. Frodo and Bilbo wandered often through the gardens of Lorien, laughing together as they had in their youth. They sat beneath trees whose leaves shone like glass, telling stories of the Shire to elves who had never seen mortal lands. The elves loved their tales, for in them was woven the simple beauty of mortal life, the taste of bread, the scent of earth after rain, the joy of a hearth at evening. Olorin would visit them often, though he spent much of his time walking among the halls of wisdom, speaking with the Valar and the Maiar who had not gone into the world. He taught many among them of the courage of mortals, of their fleeting lives and unyielding hearts, and some who had once thought the children of men small and weak now spoke of them with reverence. One evening, as he returned from the high halls, he found Frodo standing beside the sea once more. The hobbit's face was radiant, yet there was a far look in his eyes. "I had a dream," Frodo said softly as Olorin approached. "I saw the Shire again, green and golden beneath the sun. Sam was there, old and wise, and his children gathered round him. They were planting a tree, white as snow, tall and fair, and though I could not touch it, I knew it was the same light that once burned in the phial of Galadriel. It lives still." Olorin's eyes shone. "Yes, the seed was carried across the sea, in memory if not in form. The light cannot die, Frodo. You carried it in your heart, and now it shines in theirs." Frodo smiled, and for a moment tears glimmered on his cheeks. "Then I can rest." "You already do," said Olorin, laying a hand upon his shoulder. "You rest in peace, and your peace becomes part of the world itself." The sun sank low, and the waves turned to silver. As they watched, the first stars kindled above the sea, bright and clear. Olorin felt the faintest stir of the wind upon his face, carrying with it a sound, a voice, distant but dear, like the laughter of children far away. He looked eastward, and for an instant he thought he saw beyond the curve of the world, to the green hills of the Shire, where the lights of evening gleamed in windows round and warm. The scent of wood smoke and summer grass filled his senses, and he smiled. Then the vision passed, and he stood once more upon the shores of the west. But his heart was light, and he knew the world was well. The sea was calm, and the air was clear. The stars shone bright upon the water, and their reflections seemed to dance with joy. Olorin lifted his staff, no longer a tool of power but a symbol of remembrance, and touched its tip to the sand. A soft light spread outward, forming a circle of gold that shimmered for a moment before fading. "It is done," he whispered. "The journey, the fire, the long watch, all fulfilled." Galadriel's voice came to him across the wind, faint yet clear. "Then let the light rest, Olorin, keeper of hope." He turned and walked slowly toward the shining fields, where Frodo and Bilbo waited beneath the shadowless trees. Their laughter reached him like the chime of silver bells, and he joined them gladly. Together they walked into the heart of the West, where time had no dominion and sorrow no memory. And so ended the long tale of Gandalf the Grey, Olorin of the Maiar, servant of the secret fire, and friend of all free peoples. His light had burned through shadow and storm, and though his road had led beyond the circles of the world, his memory endured wherever courage and kindness met. Far across the sea, in the quiet corners of Middle-earth, children still spoke of him by the firelight, of the wandering wizard with the silver laugh and the blazing staff, who had brought light where darkness dwelt. And when the wind rose at evening and the stars shone above the hills, it seemed to some that they heard his voice still, a whisper upon the air, soft and timeless. Walk in hope, my friends, for even the smallest light may guide the lost through shadow. Then the wind would fade, and the night would grow calm, but the stars above would burn all the brighter, as if the fire of Gandalf the White still watched over the world he had saved, forever shining, forever at peace.